Alright, we're back with day number 3, and because of Kira Miki's visit to the bar last day, she has one of her songs stuck in her head, so before work, that's the thing that we need to buy, which will also give us access to it in the jukebox, which is good because it's one of the better tracks of the game, which is saying something.
Mm-hmm. So we too will be humming it in our heads.
It's not even a joke.
No, it's not. I think buying Kira Miki stuff is what nearly killed me on my first playthrough.
My first time around, I was pretty straight-laced and only bought the things that she wanted.
Well, that was very good of you.
Okay.
And very good foresight of you.
The augmented... So this is one of the... Your apps will show this exclamation point whenever they updated. So Danger U hasn't updated since the last time we've played. Augmented Eye has, and we also have Kira Miki's blog access now. So Neo San Francisco, hit by an earthquake.
So there's a Neo San Francisco, but China's the same.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what is the going on day 3. I think it's like day 4-ish when things start going crazy, but...
Yeah, I think day 3 we're still getting introduced to the characters for the most part.
Also, there's just like something that Donovan did something nice, I don't know.
Oh, it's...
Like the one guy he threw to the wolves, Panthers.
Let me still get ISP blocking via regions. Let's see what Kira Miki has going on.
Nice banner, though.
Yeah, that is a good banner.
Mm-hmm.
So she liked the concert in Glitch City.
Can't help but admire the woman. She runs the blog the same way I do.
It's also organized in reverse chronology, which is the same way a lot of sites do it now, which drives me crazy.
Yeah, it's a pain.
Like, I understand why the most recent thing should be first for visibility, but like when I go into the site's archive, like, give it to me from start to finish.
Because that's the funny thing about the internet. Nothing's not archive anymore. And nothing's not a giant archive anymore.
Alright, but that's pretty much it.
Let's get down to it. It's Thursday. I have words. Words I'll probably need to say for later, but...
Do you have any words for now?
Her hair is okay. I'm okay with Alma's hair. I am fine with Alma's hair. This is, I have mixed feelings on Alma's execution. Once again, with my usual thing, I don't hate her. I wouldn't be doing this game if I hated anything about it, but I do have... I'm gonna have a lot to say about the, writing of women through a lens that is a bit more of a personal interest versus a storytelling interest, but that's really kind of not gonna come up till later.
One thing that we can talk about a little bit in more broad strokes, since she's here now, is this game, either jokingly or seriously, it seems now, given with some added context from the developers, that it was mostly a joke, sort of advertised itself as being a waifu bartending sim. And it's really not.
It's not, like, there are pretty girls, yeah, but, like, you could but that's pretty much about literally as deep as it goes. It's kind of not focused on really the dating sim aspect at all, just like, from a start, right out of the gate. But it's really kind of a character-driven narrative, and all of the characters are treated as characters, men and women alike, for the most part. But, there's little hiccups here and there, but... So it's really kind of not to the same culture that they were really billing it to, which is the best girl culture, the who's your favorite, the weirdo throw pillowy mouse pad, etc., etc., etc. crowd that are just kind of like fawning over your favorites. And just basically having women available for consumption and availability. That's really not at all what this game is about. And it's one of those things that it's a label with a lot of baggage, and I don't think that the dev team really had the foresight to realize what that entailed. So I think that was kind of one of the biggest things that really caused this game to suffer. And it's kind of interesting to actually have something that's primary flaw is the marketing, ultimately.
Yeah, but, the word waifu has a lot of connotations, that really are, let's call them divisive. I don't want to say negative because that's a very subjective thing. There are a lot of people who are very into, waifu culture, and while I may think that's wrong or disagree with that, that's their jam. But going beyond like the cultural stuff, term waifu means a lot as far as the way the characters are written. It emphasizes them for consumption rather than, engagement.
Or characters, for that matter.
And Alma is really the only instance in Valhalla where the whole kind of waifu philosophy really kind of cuts through. In her storyline, in her dialogue and stuff, there's an emphasis on her body, there's an emphasis on her, sexual proclivities, and less on her personal journey, which there really isn't one. You hear about her family life later, but really the emphasis on Alma throughout the game is she has big boobs and she sleeps around.
And she's like hot and older.
Yeah.
Which I think is kind of like a bit of a self-admitted vice by the dev team in her creation. It's like, that's fair. We have characters that are written to our personal tastes, but there's a time when it gets disruptive to the story, and I think that's kind of what Alma really bothers me, because for most of the other aspects of the game, you kind of really can't tell, but this is sort of the really big bump in the suspension of disbelief / general smoothness of the narrative, especially since she's kind of got a lot of time that's dedicated to a lot of stuff that ultimately kind of doesn't contribute to the overall arc of the story. And I know that's kind of saying a little bit because, you could put in an easy counter criticism like, well, Shelby, it's a character-driven narrative. Naturally, everyone's story is kind of not contributing to the story, but I mean, thematically, it really kind of doesn't add much. Her personal life, and even the life of her family, is something that kind of doesn't really gel quite as well with the cyberpunk narrative. Usually everybody else's stories, even the characters, at least have some sort of involvement in the politics, or the culture at large, or have, like, some sort of involvement in the changing times, or at least kind of has a basic opinion. And since Alma's a hacker, there's a little bit of that there, but her primary story and narrative is focused more on domestic issues. And normally that wouldn't be bad. I am going to have a couple complaints about that later on. But generally it doesn't quite sort of fit the same theme as well as everything else did, in my humble opinion. It's just kind of a standout in a lot of ways, and at times I really just kind of question what it's ultimately contributing to in the overarching narrative, especially since a lot of her personal stories you could clip out and kind of not lose a lot either about her or the world at large. But that is my personal feelings on that matter.
And I agree. She's not... I wouldn't quit. I didn't stop playing because of her. She's not that atrocious, but it's a whenever your highs are so high, like they are in Valhalla, the lows seem a lot lower than they probably actually are.
And honestly, the word disruptive is just kind of like the absolute worst thing you can have in an otherwise very smooth story and a very smooth gaming experience. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, but like even like whenever you get down to like the way what we're seeing on the screen right now, like yeah, she's checking some boxes as far as like, you know, your fetish territory goes. You have, you know, the rib sweater and whatnot, but like it's still not, the emphasis is not on, I mean the emphasis is on her hair more than anything.
That amazing hair, but
it's just a matter of she feels like a holdover from an older version of the game, I guess would be the best way to put it. She feels kind of like she feels like the first character that they made, and the game matured as they made it, but Alma didn't.
Not to mention, she's not anywhere to the point of kind of like stealing the spotlight, but she also does come out a lot too. Like, she's not... I mean, I ultimately have problems with other characters like Streaming Chan, who we'll see later, but at least Streaming Chan is just kind of a bit player and doesn't really come up a lot, while Alma is generally focused as pretty central to the narrative, and when you've got her next to people like Jamie, and Gil, and Dana, and even Dorothy, and Sei, who kind of have just as much, if not more, who she has just as much, if not more, screen time with, and they all have some sort of a bit of a darker dealing going on with the world around them. She's just kind of a bit of the odd duck compared to everyone else.
Yeah, she's so central to the goings-on that there eventually is a point where you play as her.
And, like, I know, like, this is toward the very, very end, but I know that I was mad when, in the main game without the side stuff, I really wanted to see more of Sei and Stella, and she kind of was the one who showed up at the final part. It's like, no!
We don't care!
The game cut right before the people that we do want to see resolve.
Yeah, I guess what it comes down to is just, she's not bad, because, like, even when you grade her against a lot of other, like, you know, quote-unquote waifus, like, characters deliberately designed to be appealing in that specific way to the audience, like, she's still, again, above par. Because while there are stumblings in her character writing, she's still, you know, there is still a character there. She's a hacker. She dislikes, you know, this whole Alice Rabbit trend thing, even though that plot pretty much dead ends. She has family problems. And she's Jill's friend. Like, there's stuff there. Like, it's not incredibly complex or deep, but there's still stuff, more stuff than a lot of other, you know, waifus that you see. But it's...
I guess I would kind of...
She's the only one. That's the problem.
I guess the only thing I'd really fight you on there is just kind of one... In a game like this, just kind of not belonging is really, to me, almost as bad a sin as just being a kind of nothing character of nothing. And just because this is a game, like I said, the highs are the highs, and I really like how alchemated and just kind of well thought out everything really is in comparison, so she's just borderline jarring, like not to the point where you would actually just put down the game. And I had a second point too. I guess like my second point is whether or not you ultimately kind of are okay with the waifu culture as a thing, and I admit that I have personal distaste because, you know, yak feminism, yak racism, yak orientalism, yak, but like, even just personal taste aside, it's just kind of... I feel like so much of her time could have been dedicated to, like, another more meaningful subplot, and I guess even my minor character on that is just, like, she's set up as Jill's friend, but I just kind of don't get a lot of care between their interactions. They're just kind of so inherently bickery. I was kind of almost half expecting for her to legit backstab Jill over the course of the story. Like I said, that's
No, but they talk about sex a lot, though.
Yeah. It's like, boobs. I'm seeing boobs again.
prepared to see that a lot when Alma's on screen.
Mm-hmm. So, like, those are my complaints, and I still ultimately agree with Ray. Really, like, this is just kind of... It's only upsetting because you know the game can do so much better and has done so much better. So this is just kind of... The eyesores are just so sore. Like, not even eye bleedy, just sore. Oh, man. 2 in a row. We're really banging them out of the park.
Well, it's any consolation, I think this is like the last time Donathan shows up for a while.
I was gonna say.
Hey, more boob talk, and Alma's not on screen.
Yeah, minor pacing issues here. They're just sometimes you'll just get into weird pockets of boob humor. And you just kind of have to sift through it. Just sort of like how they just kind of unintentionally like clutter bad characters together. Just sometimes there's weird boob stuffs together. This soundtrack though, it's like, just sit back and listen. Suddenly my complaints are gone.
Yeah, so since we've pretty much aired our laundry about Donovan for the most part, and he's not going to give us much more to work with, I guess I'll take a moment to talk about the soundtrack.
Ooh, please do.
For one thing, I really appreciate them going a more synth and MIDI style with it, given the aesthetic of the game with its pixel art. It would have been really easy for them to do like a 16-bit or even like a 32-bit kind of style where it's really... I have a distaste for like bit chiptune music, stuff that's borrowing the aesthetic of the NES and this Super NES to kind of make throwback music. Like Anamanaguchi does chiptune stuff, and then some. And one of the biggest reasons that I dislike it is because it misses the point of why chiptune, like the NES soundtrack and stuff like that, is so fondly remembered. The human brain remembers simple melodies better than they do more complex. And one of the reasons that we remember, the Super Mario theme or, the Castlevania theme or a lot of those NES titles, we remember them so vividly is for 2 reasons. One, we heard them ad nauseum because they were loops. So we would hear them for hours on end because our little dumb kid fingers couldn't figure out how to beat the levels for a while. And 2, it's because the sound hardware for those consoles was very simplistic, and I believe like the NES could only play 3 tones at a time. So you'd have your melody, you'd have your accompaniment, and you'd have your percussion track for the most part. And that's a very simple setup for a song, and it sticks in your brain a lot easier because the brain remembers simple melodies. And chiptune music, stuff that's supposed to be evocative of that style, misses the simplicity part completely. I just find that stuff to be really kind of noisy and cluttered and overly just complex because they're trying to cram as many sounds as possible. It's like the reverse of the NES sound hardware. And I appreciate that they don't do that. It's not really... It's MIDI and synth. It's like synthwave almost. And that gives it a lot more distinct style. It's also... I like that kind of music. That being said, there are 2 different soundtracks available on your jukebox. There's the actual main game soundtrack, and there's the prologue soundtrack, and I believe they had 2 different composers. Their names escape me, and I don't have enough free hands right now to look them up, pay attention to what I'm saying, and read at the same time. So I apologize for that in advance. But I actually like the prologue soundtrack stylistically better. It's a lot darker. It's a lot grungier. Like, there's a lot more like drum and bass kind of. Well, not quite drum and bass, but like the percussion hits harder, and like the basses are a lot more like distorted almost. You can hear it really good, like Bass of the Titans, just dirty basses. And I feel like it actually, like, the main game soundtrack fits the game's tone a lot better than the prologue does. Because the prologue is a lot more almost melancholic at times, whereas the game's generally speaking pretty lighthearted. There are some, you know, darker and more serious moments in the game, more dramatic, but for the most part, it's just kind of a romp almost, where there's, you know, just you're having fun spending time with the characters.
Mm-hmm. It's
So
the one
a
job
lot
you
of-
like. Go on.
Yeah. So a lot of the prologue doesn't fit that tone necessarily, but I ended up just personal taste. I listen to the prologue soundtrack a lot more than I actually do the main game soundtrack. Not that there aren't good tracks; it's all fantastic.
And I really didn't know a lot of that, so I know this is honestly one of the big things that Ray was really stressing when trying to get this up, was that the soundtrack was a huge talking point for him. And that was kind of one of the big reasons why he was working so hard on making sure that the sound has as good fidelity as possible, just for the both of us to appreciate while reviewing this. So I was really, really looking forward to hearing his talk, and congrats, man, you delivered.
The soundtrack goes a long way in just establishing the tone of the game and the atmosphere, because what you're looking at is it. Like, you have Jill's room and you have the bar, so we're not getting a lot of visuals. I mean, I can go up here and turn the channel on the TV, but that's about it. I can get my nice RoboCop reference there because it's, you know, this is cyberpunk. And I'm always down for RoboCop. But, like, this is what I was talking about, like, just that dirty bass lines.
It does have a nice beat.
But, yeah. You need something else to really pick up the slack, because we're not going to get a lot as far as visuals go, and the soundtrack really makes up for that by, you know, establishing and even getting some world building in there. By you get to hear Kira Miki's song too.
It is just kind of that nice needle and thread you need just to make sure everything is just sewed up neat and tidy together. And boy, is that some good embroidery. Oh, thank God he's gone.
But, like, this song in particular, you can really hear the difference between, as I cut it off by keep going, but with that song in particular, you can really hear the difference in just the way the two soundtracks were composed.